something that happened over the last couple of weeks. As you see, we start putting stripes on the street, on Main Street, and I really very much want to thank the Department of Transportation and the regional director who, right before I left, a few days before I left, we were on the phone, and he was on his computer with the plan, and I was on my computer, and we mapped the whole Main Street because we thought from the beginning that they were doing to comply with the complete streets. They didn't think that. At the end of the day, he was a big help, and I really appreciate his help. Last time he called me, I was actually on a beach in Greece, but he assured me that everything was going according to plan. And so I just want Director. So, let's review the resolutions. We have the request from Fire Department to hold the boot drive. And then we have a notice of petition and petition Fredonia Temple Brigham Apartments, LLC.
That's another one for their assessment, property assessment.
Oh, okay.
That's for a reduction in property assessment again.
We have a transfer from active role to honor of Fredonia Fire Department. The resignation of Adam Dubel, part-time police officer.
Number 5, Mayor, we're going to have to scratch. We don't have enough people here. Todd caught that.
Oh, okay.
I need 4 trustees.
Oh, you mean the trustees?
Yeah, I need
right. We need 4.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have the training request of 11 volunteers to attend the annual Chautauqua County Weekend in Montour Falls. Training request of Michael Woodward to attend basic operations of wastewater treatment plants. And finally, the volunteer fire request, mutual aid, Michelle Sutter. Okay. And then we have the fire department report for June and July 2017. The fire department, the police department report for June 2017, as well as the justice. And then we have the alcohol consumption, sales and consumption in Barker Common. Anybody wants to address that?
Sure. I'd start out. I'd like to address the audience and the rest of the village residents. This is being brought up because this discussion is in regards to our local alcohol policy in public places. It just happened that the Chamber of Commerce in the evening in Barker Common was the event most recent. This issue has been occurring over the last year and a half. Our charter clearly states that consumption of alcohol and possession of open containers of alcohol are prohibited in public places. Our insurance carrier has explicitly stated we should not be allowing this to happen. The liability, if any injury or death occurring from consumption of alcohol in a public place, would increase our rates dramatically. This is liability we, the village officials, should not be putting on the shoulders of the village residents. The village created a youth council that is trying to promote a good example for our youth to follow. What are we saying to these children and young adults that we advocate alcohol consumption? We're opening up Pandora's box and setting a dangerous precedent in allowing events to include alcohol. If we allow one, you have to be fair and allow everyone. What would that do during Fredonia Fest in Barker Commons? To the best of my knowledge, the village officials can also be held personally liable in the event of litigation, which is something I do not want to be part of. Would one of us here be okay with having one of these events at our own personal residence with unrestricted alcohol consumption? I think not. Under general duties of the trustees, we are to make such bylaws, local laws, rules, and regulations not inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution of the State of New York, as they shall deem proper to carry into effect the previous provisions of this act and any other laws, ordinances, rules, and regulations applicable to said village. Under duties of the mayor, it states, she shall take care that all the laws relating to said village and the bylaws, ordinances, rules, and regulations which shall from time to time be enacted shall be faithfully executed. That all being stated, I would like now to rescind my votes on these events that we passed resolutions to, including the alcohol, and make a motion to rescind those resolutions that include alcohol and revote on those resolutions so that they don't contain alcohol. When I originally voted on these resolutions, I was either given a thimble of information and or did not have proper counsel. Going forward, I will get as much information and guidance from Village Council and any available resources I can to make decisions and to take in effect our charter and code and all applicable laws, rules, and regulations of the state of New York. Rick had a super quote. It was, some individuals can learn by others' mistakes. Others need to have something bad happen before they get the message. Let us be the first in that quote. So thank you, and those are my thoughts. And, you know, I am not opposed to events in Barker Commons or on in village parks. I think it's a win-win situation for everybody. I think it gives our village residents something great to do. It offers events to go see and participate in. And also is a plus for our village businesses, which through extra foot traffic will see increase in business. So I'm not opposed to having these events. I just think the liability incurred is super great, and it's against our code at the moment in charter. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Esser. Now, I just want to put a few of my thoughts here before I ask the rest of the trustees. First of all, I mean, no one obviously is trying to encourage alcohol consumption by minors. That's a given. That's against the law. We don't want to do it. As you said, we have the Youth Council to help us with that. At the same time, I just don't feel we should go to extreme and cancel anything that has to do with alcohol. I just think we should put enough work to make sure that these events are safe for everybody. They're all over the country. For example, I've been to one where in order to taste wine, you have to have a ticket. One ticket is good for one tasting, and in order for you to get a ticket, you have to produce a legal document of your age. So even if you are 85 years old and you look 85 years old, they're going to ID you to make sure that you are over 21. So I do think that we have to discuss it and find a way to encourage local businesses and encourage having a good time, even if we have to put some physical barrier. So we make sure that these people don't take a glass of wine and go everywhere, which is what you referred in your email, and I agree that's not a good idea. But at the same time, I just don't want to jump to extreme measures before we are. I mean, other communities are able to do it. We can find out how they are doing it. I mean, with everybody's approval, everybody can bring some ideas. So to make them safe, to make them legal, and to make them profitable for village businesses, and for people to, you know, to look forward to coming here. (1:30 in the morning). So, but these are my thoughts.
Take a minute.
Yeah.
You want to go first?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I'll go after you.
Thank you. Trustee Linden. At the time that proposal was, when they first came to us, the chamber, I had questions and reservations about that, and they said, oh, it was still in the talking phase, and they would get back to us and everything. And what happened is, then they come in on Monday, and the event was going to happen on Wednesday, so the vote came very, very fast. And I'm looking at the request that came from David Dangler, and I don't think they went by what they were asking. And the thing that bothered me was that one of my concerns, I said, are we going to stay right within the perimeter where it was going to be roped off, it was going to be over by the information booth? And that really, yes, it was located over that, but I saw several people walking around with containers, and that does concern me that way. So if we're going to, and the other thing that I also questioned about, and I don't know if you were part of setting this all up, Jim, too, but I don't recall and I don't see anything here in the request that said anything about people coming and selling their wares. And what I meant about that, there was a very large, like it was like a party vehicle that you can get, a van, and the lady was selling clothes out of the back of that. And she pulled that right up onto the sidewalk. So it was on the sidewalk, right up parallel with kind of the water fountain. And I'm thinking, you know, when we have things in the park, like with whether they come for the farm festival or if they come for the farmer's market and have their things, I think they get permits, and there's some kind of stipulation with that. I was just surprised at how much more it seemed to, because I was there with my daughter. But the point is, too, if we are going to do this, then, and if it so states in our charter that that is not something we can do, then I think we need to do our homework and get things in place so that maybe there's something more that the liability, we need to really understand where the liability is going to come in. And if it's going to escalate our insurance carrying, which could happen, we have to consider that. I mean, if our premiums triple or more, I just think we need to have more time than them coming on a Monday and giving the okay to do it on a Wednesday. And it's going to happen again in a couple of weeks. So if that's the case, we really need to make sure there's a very defined area that no alcohol or the beer or the wine gets beyond that. But I know the only place we can have it is up
Russell Joy Park.
Russell Joy Park.
Exception to that.
That was the exception to that. So I agree. I think we just need to, both had good points. We need to make sure that we take care of this so that the village is covered and still be able to have the functions. And that was my concern. That's why I voted against it. I just felt it was too helter-skelter, too thrown together. And as I said, the letter looking from Dave Dangler, I don't think what they said was going to happen. I don't know who. That was the other thing I wanted too. As they said, there was some concern because they said people on the street had stopped me, and they said if we had, the winery we had was from Northeast. Was that the wine company, the winery that came and was selling their wares?
I don't know where they're actually from.
They were from Northeast.
No.
They were from, actually they're based out of Westfield.
Okay, because that was a question too. They said if we are having wineries that are coming from out of New York State, right on the border, then we have to make sure they have New York State license to sell and distribute that. And if we're not really diligent about, and as you just said, well, I didn't know, and Jim didn't know, and I wasn't part of that. So, I mean, I just think we really need to pull in the reins a little bit and make sure we know what's going on before we give the okay.
And apparently, even the insurance has different, different stages.
Mm-hmm.
Either you can taste and
right. shop
and buy, or you can buy but not carry, and they have to send it to you. Different things. I definitely think we should put something together that we can address all of this But at the end of the day, as I said, we need to make sure that they are addressed, that the village is not under any kind of, jeopardy.
I was going to ask, if we change the charter so that we make these kind of provisions and that, then do we have to have the public meeting? We have to have the public
Yes,
forum.
yes.
So it has to all be, it's not something that the board just says, okay, we're going to do that.
No.
Okay. So we have to have it all.
If you're changing the charter or a local law, then it has to go through the public hearing process.
Plus, we also have to make the public aware that you're increasing the liability of each and every one of the village residents by doing this, and that's kind of my point. I mean, I by no means want to cancel out any of these events, but I think the village residents need to know that we have laws in our charter and code in place to protect the village residents from liability. And on top of that, our insurance carriers have extreme concerns over superseding our charter for this. I mean, I hope, before the village residents go and change our charter to allow alcohol at village events and on village property, we should all know the liability assumed. It'd be like having a big party at your house and letting your...
Actually, no, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can request the people who are having the event or the people who are doing the tasting to cover the extra insurance. Because we don't need 365 days insurance for open containers and for alcohol consumption. This is not going to happen every day. However, we can request, the same way we request $1 million to be co-insured for liability for other events, we can request the legal liability insurance to be carried by the people who are actually either putting the event together or selling the products. So no, not necessarily, doesn't necessarily go to the village residents, because as I said, it doesn't make any sense to buy insurance for...
No, but if somebody files a claim of an injury or a death and there's litigation, our village residents will pay the increases of increased insurance
And that's where the
premiums.
insurance is going to. Like if the insurance is suggesting $5 million, we're going to go to the people who are doing the event, and we're going to request that they cover their event for $5 million.
Well, I'm not comfortable at all putting myself in personal liability, or I'm not in favor of putting the village residents in personal liability. So I'm just, our charter had a reason when it was put in there for a reason, and I believe it's a very valid reason. I don't really see, if somebody is down at an event here and they want alcohol, they could probably go 50 yards and hit about 3 different bars or restaurants that have alcohol and the proper permits and the licenses to do that. I just want everybody, all the village residents, to be very aware of the liability that the village is assuming by holding these events, whether or not you have the $1 million policy or an additional policies. If somebody gets killed or injured, your insurance company could probably drop you or really increase your rates. And I just don't...
I understand that, but let's not be catastrophic here. I mean, as I said before,
It could have
many, yes, I understand that. This is the discussion that we're going to have again and again. But I don't want to, that's my personal opinion. I think if it's a defined area, and maybe we're going to need some security, maybe, that to secure the area, some physical barriers. Alcohol is illegal. It's legal in the United States. So
is marijuana, but I wouldn't have a...
Not here, it's
Not here it isn't, no, but that
No,
doesn't... Go, I'm sorry, go
If you
ahead.
don't mind, if you don't mind.
please.
If you don't mind. Our charter actually does allow for the consumption of alcohol beverages in the village currently. And not only specifically says in Russell Joy Park, but it also states that for events like block parties, And where that block party may happen to be, we're allowed, as a board, we're allowed to grant that.
But that wasn't considered a block party.
Well, it's an event, whether it's a block party or not. What I'm just saying is there is, whether you label it a block party or it is in public property. So we do allow it in public places, okay? And it's not only in Russell Joy Park. Okay, now the alcohol sales and actually production of alcoholic beverages is one of the fastest growing industries in our country today. And if you're worried about the economic impacts to our community and we're looking for growth and development, we should be concerned with those issues and how our community is going to grow. Many communities across the state, this state, have recognized that, and they're using that to their advantage. It may cost a little bit for a liability insurance, but it certainly is something we should definitely be looking into as continuing events and growth of. You're looking for tourism. We don't have large industry in Fredonia. We need feet on the street. We need tourism. And one of the biggest ways to do that is hold events, and yes, they do have alcohol, and they do have it throughout the state. I've looked into it. I've asked other communities. Some communities use local development corporations to protect themselves. They form that. Some communities ask that the vendors supply all the required and insurance policies to protect the village, naming their community, so that we don't get sued in an ample amount to do so. Maybe the organization that funds that, or the people themselves, or they spread it out between the vendors. That's how it's done. That's how it's done in all the other communities that I've investigated so far. Yeah, we've been taking some risk right now, and we should not be. But as far as eliminating it, I think we shouldn't. That's probably not the best thing for the growth of our community. You know, I'm sure everybody has different opinions on that, but as a business owner in Fredonia, we need feet on the street, and you can talk to any business owner down Main Street, and that's really what they need. And if it's part of it, if it means you know, that we need to help these wine and beer producers in our region to come here, maybe that's what we should do.
The question comes in is, where do you set that limit
I was going to say,
of
where do you set
liability?
it?
I mean, are you going to set it 10 million, 5 million, 20 million? You have to, when there's a death or somebody gets, you know, severely injured to the point where they're disabled for the rest of their life, these things could be multi-million-dollar lawsuits. Well, just so that you know that if an award is awarded by a jury that exceeds the limits of liability of the insurance that you have, the village would be on the hook to bond to pay the rest of that award. Part of our tax cap is that if you do have an award such as that, you can eliminate that because you are going to have to jack your tax rate up to cover any kind of awards like that. You have no choice because a court of law has issued that award. So now you have to say, will we ever get sued anything above 10 million or 15 million?
I think that risk is always there because we're not a dry town, and our charter says that. So that I guess, I mean, I don't think that we're overstepping, you know, what we already have. We're not a dry town.
What about a corporation like the one that Dunkirk has?
I was going to say.
Their coffers are not huge enough to be sued for multi-millions. And this is the thing. I mean, these are things that the village residents are going to have to pay up for if something ever, and you know what? If something like that would ever happen, somebody would kill one of my family members, I would be beside myself, or kill anybody, to be honest with you. This is not something, and I realize this isn't a dry town. That's why we have businesses that have the proper licenses and all their insurances, and they can't be taken for. We're not talking about our money and stuff here. This is the taxpayers' money that we're gambling with, saying, well, I think on the benefit of having things you got the balance of things coming into our village and bringing in commerce or liability, and it's a fine, there's a fine area to do that, and I don't think...
I just want us to be careful not to close any doors, because this is, I can tell you, if somebody falls from these steps here and, dies, they can sue us again. The steps in the front of the stair, the problems are all over the place. We have to be, this is something that we can predict, let's say. We can take the necessary steps to be prepared as we can. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying not to say we're not allowing any alcohol. Let's say from now on, any event, you want to have an event, no alcohol is allowed.
Per our charter, that's the way it should be, until our charter changes to allow that by public hearing, and the village of Fredonia residents decide that.
It currently allows.
We should stand by our charter.
It currently allows it. It currently allows it.
In certain
circumstances.
In certain places,
yes. This is the thing.
And then we have to discuss the fact that maybe we need to change the charter. Because unfortunately, I don't drink, nothing. So it doesn't affect me. I'm going to go to festivals anyways without drinking. But this is where people are going.
And if our village residents come to public hearings and understand the liabilities that are going to be assumed by doing that, then that's fine. If the village residents want to do that, I'm all for it. But right now, if something happens and we have
nobody is trying to put anything behind anybody's back. That's why we're discussing it here. And obviously, if we need to change the charter, we need a public hearing, and I welcome that. That's a very good idea, actually, because I do want the people of the village should know anything and everything we're doing here, and anything and everything that is in the charter. I'm all for that. I'm sure we're going to discuss it again and again, as I said, but I will actually invite all of you to go and research it a bit. What can we do? What are the options? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And maybe take these options and examine them instead of saying, well, you know what, until we change that, nothing is going to happen.
I didn't say cancel the events, Mayor. I said just do not include the alcohol to limit the liability until you change your laws to apply to that.
And that's up to the board, obviously.
Does that make sense? I mean, you're taking all this in. Maybe you should have a little bit of input or some thought on this here.
There are several swirling issues that are all tied in together in this, with the insurance liability issue, as well as, I mean, to take a step back, the letter we got from, the letter you received from the chamber was for tastings. I didn't raise a particular issue with that because wine tasting is a very regulated process, and it does not involve the sale of bottles or containers. It's a limited number of ounces in a limited space, a limited number per person. That's what my understanding was going to happen. So I think we do need the policy revision to say what the village is or isn't allowing when they lift open container, if you all decide open container can be lifted, which is a level beyond me. But certainly, and I know I'm not addressing all that Mr. Hessig raised there, but the insurance issue, the liability, the fact that what occurred wasn't what the village thought was going to be happening. Or approved. That's what we need to kind of mash together to figure out what we need to do going forward. Is there another chamber?
Yeah, there is.
Is it?
The 23rd,
yes,
isn't it?
30th. August 30th is the next event.
Okay, thank you. Next stupid question is, what's today? Today's the 14th. Okay, so
We have one more meeting.
we will have a work session next week and then a full board meeting before that.
No, there's no.
Oh, no, not the 28th.
Yeah, the 28th is the next
On the
workshop.
28th,
Yeah, just the 28th, that's right.
Oh, that's right, because we're
Yeah,
Because we're in
summer.
August.
summer hours.
Yeah.
So by the 28th,
This would we call for a special meeting, if that's the case, if that's what the board or the mayor so
And if-
decides.
And if that happens, I definitely think somebody from the chamber, Dave or you, needs to, because it just even says the planning is still in progress. So we went ahead and agreed on, I mean, you know, it was not, I'm sorry, I don't think what the event happened with the chamber is what you folks came to us and asked for.
Well,
And what
and I
we
think that
agreed to.
that's a good point, valid point that you're saying and what Todd is saying. These people, when they come to you and ask you
Yes.
this stuff, they have to be very specific as to what exactly it is they're asking for and not be general to the point where you're just opening up everything. You know,
Yeah.
because their opinion is, well, you authorize it, so
Yeah.
I'm just going to bring in everything and anything I want. And that's not the case.
No, very specific.
Yeah, you
It has
have to be very specific, and
Yes.
those
Yeah,
those
what
requests
type of
there are
tasting,
very
sampling,
general
or
when you
selling
look
are
at
you
them.
doing? That's-
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
And
there's
I-
nothing.
Peel back the onion to those requests, they're different than what
Yeah.
the...
And I don't
what
think
you
selling
want.
was part of it.
I'm sorry?
I don't think selling was part of it.
No, it wasn't.
No, it just
Because
says
I'm
sampling.
looking
And
at,
sampling is different.
Yeah.
That's true.
you know,
So,
So what you're violating there is New York State Liquor Authority laws, in essence. You're not violating our charter, you're violating other things that weren't met or taken into thought before we did this event. And that's-
well, like you say, you're only talking about liability issues that may be upon the organization that hosted it, and then hopefully.
but I
the
think
village.
we have a right to
We
request
should.
more of the folks,
Well,
by,
because you need to know
whether it's
whether-
the
what
chamber
type
or
of
anybody else
insurance has to
coming.
be had. I mean,
Yeah.
because each event has to have its own insurance, and the location of each event has to have its own. That's what you identify, is the location and the type of sales or non-sales you're going to have, what type of sampling. So,
But we still have the right to ask what they're going to do.
correct.
I mean, and this
Sure.
does, as I said, I remember Kara mentioned there's nothing in this particular thing about a bouncy house. But Kara had mentioned that, and then, as I said, then we have somebody coming and selling. I just, you know, when we make the folks for the farm festival and the market have permits, it was just total out of, I mean, I'm open, and I
That
see
event is
Doug's
over, but I would
point.
like to see, I mean, the solution here is, I mean, we're going over this, hashing the
Yeah.
same thing over again here. The solution is just to ask them to be more clear, and provide the type of insurance that would be required.
And with
We should be
them,
more clear, and we should
when
be
you
more
come in
clear
on the
as to what-
28th, you need
What
to
we
have,
want.
you know, we need to know exactly what you're going to do in the park that day. Not just what we got from Dave.
I mean, would this board be interested in hearing what our insurance carriers' thoughts on this are? I know we had conveyed it through some emails and that, but I mean, to actually have our insurance carrier come here and say, you know what, I understand having people come in and have the events is good for our economy, it's good for businesses, it's all great.
I'll tell you, insurance carrier is going to want to sell insurance.
But that's the thing.
that-
Insurance
But we
looks
still
at
have
it
it, though.
from their point of view. And they're going to tell you that the best thing is not to take any risk whatsoever. If everybody can stay home, that's the best thing.
Would you be
We
willing,
should,
as a
excuse me, we should be, and absolutely you should be in the position to decide what is the best way to put it all together. To have the insurance, to be to cover the village, at the same time, support the economy with events like that, support the tourism with events like that, I mean, as I said, we should make a whole picture. We should work towards the whole project. Not saying only, well, the insurance said not to do that. Yes, because that's what they sell in insurance. That's one part. And then the Chamber of Commerce comes and say, well, we want all of this. Yes, because that's the whole picture they want. And then it's you and us all together that we can put the things together and we can say this is what is allowed and this is what has to happen with insurance. I think it needs work, but it's not impossible. I really think we'll be able to put something together.
No, it isn't, and at this point, I guess we have to agree to disagree at this point until we come up
Okay.
with something better.
I would appreciate it if you would actually investigate the other communities that hold such events. you know, like Lewiston that does a 1.5 mile long event, and they're allowed to have alcohol from one end of the street to the other. An open event in their community. Like,
Okay.
you know, maybe you could check in and see how they insure such an event. I don't know how they do it.
Sure.
I know Dunkirk's events, they do have it, but they are under the local development corporation. But there's many, I mean,
That's how they do it.
There's
The village itself does not hold the liability. They have these separate agencies that hold the
and my guess is, Doug,
liability.
my guess is even a DLDC, once, if there's nothing to go after there, after they've exhausted all that insurance and it's on public property, they're still going to go after the city. So, I mean, if you want to take risk, I mean, to no end, we won't have any events in our community. We won't have traffic. We won't have people on the street. And you want, I mean, you really want to squash one of the fastest growing industries in the country. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
If that's the case, Jim, then promote wineries and
risk.
distilleries then to open up business here. That's what I would do if you want to promote those.
Well, they would
different
like to have
industries.
events. I mean, Ellicottville their event was started by their brewery, Ellicottville Brewing Company. They started that, and they hold it throughout their community down. And they do have areas for alcohol consumption, but they also have insurance to cover it, and it's taken care of. There is risk. There's risk with everything, but certainly there's ways solutions to take care of this. Just instead of saying no.
Well, let's find the right, we're going to discuss it again, and all of us are going to research it and see what we can find. I think that's the best solution for all this. And, also the public should be able to offer their opinion. All right. Well, we're going to, anybody from the public has anything to say? Public person?
About this issue?
About any issue.
Any issue.
There's tons of risk, there's no doubt about it. There's no way we're going to eliminate the risk of the alcohol in the parks unless we just say no. That liability and what it might mean and what kind of coverage we should have. So I reached out to the wineries and the breweries and asked them, can you name the village under your policy, under your legal liquor liability policy as another insured? Each one of them did. You should have one from Mazza, and I've got one from Victorianburg with me today, and one from Willow Creek. But Mazza's already provided one to you. They should have.
No, they provided me a regular liability insurance policy, not a liquor legal policy.
The certificate of insurance is what they gave to you?
Yeah, that's all they gave to
And
me.
that is what they were referring to when they gave it to me as well. They said that was the same, one of the same.
No, there's a specific liquor legal policy that is actually, from what I understand from the insurance companies, is it's specific to the event. So it's just a one-time deal. It's like, this is for this event here. And then once the event is over, that policy goes away. It's not something that you carry. I think Trustee Essex said it, about having a policy, or the mayor, about having a policy in place for 365
No,
days out of the year. That's not the type of policy that it is. That's my understanding. Again, I'm not an expert at this stuff. I don't want anybody, but I've talked to the insurance company, and they told me, the liquor legal is specific to the event. So once the event is over,
I
it's...
trusted each one of the people, the companies, and when I asked them this, they would give me the appropriate policy coverage because they do so many of these events. So this is the kind of certificate of insurance they're supplying to everybody else when they're participating in these events. So if it's incorrect, they've been incorrect all this time. I have a hard time believing they're going to be incorrect.
Now, the other thing was what we were supplied from one of those, that was, I won't mention a name, as their ability to sell in the park, which was not, when you looked up the actual meaning of the certificate that they gave us, it was a marketing certificate, which reverts back to what the mayor was talking about, where they can do a wine tasting and they can take orders and then fill those orders at a later date, but they can't sell on the site. They can't sell.
I did have a conversation about the differences between those two policies. And one of the wineries said, oh, you don't need the marketing one, you need the certificate of insurance that's covering you. That's the one that I have today.
Yeah.
So That is the coverage that they have. I believe that is the only coverage they have, because they would have told me it's something about a legal liquor liability policy, separate from their regular certificate of insurance.
Right.
But I do have those ones that are naming the village, and they're naming the chamber, and they're naming Festivals Fredonia, all covered on this. And I have them for you today if you want.
In the amount of?
What amount?
One is 2 million, 1 million occurrence, 2 million aggregate, and the other is 5 million occurrence.
The point is that liquor, I mean, they need to call their insurance carrier and talk about exactly that term, liquor legal liability.
That's exactly what I asked.
Yes, that's what we need. We don't need their normal, like when somebody has an event, we require them to provide a liability policy to us in the amount of $1 million, naming the village as additional insured. Totally different policy.
That's what we do with you.
Yes, correct.
Which is different.
Correct, that's it, exactly, that's different.
Okay.
The other items that you discussed were the non-alcoholic ones, the vendors that were just out in the street selling things. In order to have them sign the same kind of legal documentation that Festivals Fredonia has set up, that holds harmless the village and holds harmless the chamber. Same thing with Festivals Fredonia. This was drawn up legally years ago. And submit that to you so that you guys can see those applications.
And these should have an actual, like a stand, don't park your van on the sidewalk.
Yeah, not on the sidewalk, on the road.
No, it's on the sidewalk.
Right, that's good.
And we'll ask the police for help on that and bagging those in and asking for the street itself.
Because we really need to know what everybody's
Yeah,
doing there.
exactly what they're doing.
Beforehand.
That was not clear the first time we done, no doubt about that. It needs more clarity.
And also, she made a good point, where on other ones where she said they actually got a ticket, and to sample, you've got to be 21. We have to make sure that that's what's happening.
Each one of those wineries and breweries understand those laws and proof people they believe are not of legal age.
Okay. And if the sampling just takes within, even if it's a roped off area, so that they're not carrying it out and saying, do you want to take a taste?
Similarly, it's what we do for Festivals Fredonia when we're asking for the resolution to be passed to make the area specific to the blue garbage containers. That keeps the perimeter. Anybody outside of that perimeter, all bets are off. They can get arrested for open container.
Yes, it should be in a specific area, very close to where, they get the sample, and we should make sure that the people who are sampling are not younger than 21, and at the same time, I mean, how many times can you sample? Right? If I sample 3, I'm going to sleep right there.
What I've learned about the New York State law with beer and wine is, in events like we had for the Italian Festival and like we had for the Chamber and even Fredonia History Days, the wineries have to sell it by the bottles. Breweries can sell it by the glass or bottle, but they have to put it in a glass so you can carry it. They can literally sell you a bottle, give you glasses, and you go somewhere else.
But that's not the sampling.
No,
sampling is 2 ounces, I believe, and they have to provide the glass. You can't go with your, water glass and say,
yes.
Let me sample that.
I would ask 2 questions then of the trustees. One, are there any precedents set for suing a municipality for alcohol problems during an event, for having that event? And 2, what is Westfield doing to get around this? They must have some resolution in place to do it. They've developed a corporation to do it.
Yeah, they do.
I think that's the best avenue.
It's a good
And you've got a couple of different avenues to go down currently here with Festivals Fredonia and the Farm Festival. And Chamber.
And Larry, as far as knowing if there's been any litigation, I'm sure there has. I mean, I'd have to look up the case law, but as far as knowing exactly, no. But you know what? That's a pretty big, I mean, alcohol's a very serious matter. It's not, I'm not taking this lightly. I understand that it's a big part of different events, but it's also a big liability part of different events too. I don't know, but me personally, I don't want to be sued personally, which I can, number one. And I don't know if all the village residents understand that in order to have these events, and I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure they could be successful, most of them, without alcohol. I really do. I really don't think alcohol has to be the main part of the event to make it successful. I mean, red, white, and blues, that's what it's all about.
We're celebrating red
In
and
the
white wine
evening,
in the industry, so it's kind of hard.
the evening in Barker Common at the Chambers did. They had bounce house, they had face painting for the kids, they had a band playing. You had all different age groups there doing different things. I'm sure the senior citizens, I shouldn't assume. I'm not sure what groups were partaking in the alcohol, but I'm sure everybody under 21 was, and there was a large group under 21 that was enjoying the things that were being offered to the village residents. That's just my opinion.
We can't decide that for other people.
Yeah.
I mean, some people want to have a glass of wine, and some people are fine without it. As the village, we just have to make sure that the events are legal and the village is covered. I think that's where we need.
Having the residents, having trust in the residents to make the right decisions.
No, I just want to inform the residents of their liability. I'm not asking.
You're taking it personally, Doug. You're taking it upon yourself to
I'm a village
make
resident
the
there.
decision for them as of all people. You're taking it too personally for them. You're taking it out of their hands, their choice. They have the right to choose.
Did they not elect us, Jim, to represent them here? They voted for us. We worked for the people.
Give them options.
We're supposed to make the best
I think
decision.
you're both right in
The
this.
best decision
You're
for
both
our
right.
residents.
We are here to make the best decision for them. We are here to represent them. At the same time, we can't say now from now on you're going to stay in because that's the best thing for you to do. We have
Nobody
to give them
said
some
that.
choices. No,
Nobody
and
said
I'm
that.
exaggerating. Obviously, you don't say that. You're not saying that. But, I mean, make it legal, make it safe, and then they can take the responsibility of either complying or being in non-compliance, and then we have some legal liabilities for them.
Absolutely, but that would be up to the village residents at a public hearings to decide, that's all.
And as we
that's
said,
done
we
for
don't-
them.
That's
Our
done.
job as these festival, organizers, is to get all the information in place, get all the proper legal documentation in place, present it to you as a resolution based on a charter. You guys vote based on that resolution, whether or not you want it or not. I understand you don't, and Jim, you do. That's fine. That's what you're here for, and that's why I elected you.
Yes.
That's good.
Obviously.
But our job is to educate you and get you familiar with what we want and make sure it's what you agreed to. Last time was not.
Not.
We know that.
Thank you.
So,
And obviously, nobody wants minors to drink. I don't even want adults to drink and start walking around. I really don't. I'm very afraid of accidents. I don't want them to drive. I want to make sure that everything is the way it's supposed to, the way it's supposed to be. So, as we said, we're going to discuss it again until we come to the right solution. Anything else? Anybody else from the public? Yes.
Yes. I'm Bill Feuerstein, 370 Eagle Street. I'd like to bring to the attention of the board a particular situation that has kind of arose in the last couple of years on Eagle Street across from the property that I currently have my house at and I reside at. I'm just informing the trustees here that in the last couple of years there has been a tremendous amount of mulch that has accumulated across the street from my residence. Significant enough where it has actually grown in quantities, and I'd say probably 4 to 5 times in the last 2 years. In the last month and one day alone, we had 9 dump truck fulls visiting before noon on that particular day, with probably another half a dozen dump truck loads dumping off after lunchtime. So probably in one day, I actually physically saw approximately 15 to 14 dump truck loads of mulch, chops, chips, whatever you want to call, from the pruning of the trees and so forth from that area. That was just on one day. This has occurred over months, probably in the If you want to go cubic yards, if you were to take a look at that, it has probably 4 to 5 times in the last 2 years. I've been a resident for 20 years in that location, and there had always been a mulch pile that had been there, but it had been very, very significantly small. In the last couple of years, I've seen individual residents both contributing and also subtracting from that pile for whatever permission. I have no idea where they gathered that or where they got that from. And unfortunately, it has gotten to the point now where I have seen some of the village payloaders, so forth, literally have to go quite significantly high to try to move that pile, only to be replaced with more later on in the next couple of weeks or so. My issue with that is, one, I feel it's unsafe for many reasons. It's right by a blind grade in the area where we are, where dump trucks as well as loaders and so forth are constantly going over. There's never any particular safety precautions, pylons, people so forth that are directing traffic to be cautionary because of that. Also, just the amount of, from the wind blowing in, I get a significant enough of chipping going on in my driveway, on my property, and so forth. And lastly, safety-wise, there are things that actually you can see vapors of some sort. I don't know if it's methane or whatever, but maybe the fire department knows. You know, in the past, I know mulch has combusted in front of houses and started houses on fire and so forth. So this evening, I'd like to bring to the board's attention my concern. I have talked to the property owner across the street. It was at one time discussed with me that that pile would be moving. A few years ago, that was something that he and I had discussed. Since then, we have put our house up for sale, and we have had 2 prospective buyers or potential people looking at the house all of a sudden cross us off their list because of that actual particular circumstance. So I'm concerned about my property value also decreasing substantially as that pile grows more and more. So I would like to be able to hopefully bring that to the trustees' attention. Willing to work with anybody and anybody on some ideas. I have some ideas of my own that I'd love to share with anybody interested to listen.
Thank you very much. So, just to understand, this is what property we're talking about, 2nd Street? Our barn?
No, up further.
The
Green Terrace.
Right, okay, all right, yes. Thank you. Actually, we've been talking about it a little bit this morning, so we've gone to discuss it with trustees C.
This was not part of the workshop agenda, but it should have been part of the open portion of the regular meeting, because it wasn't part of that. But you came a little late, so that, but thank you.
Yeah, that's...
I mean, we need to work on that. We have our own dumping site. Maybe there's something in the interim that can be done to free up some space, at least so that we're not dumping there, and I don't know.
And we're discussing it a little bit. One of the options is to clear some space in our own property and move some of the brush and some of the chips up there. And I think that at the end of the day, we're going to need to do something like that. It's a matter of, you know, preparing it and doing the work. But thank you very much for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Just remember to discuss it. Okay. Anything else?
I just handed out in the workshop.
Well, we're probably going to need to go into executive session because I have something that you might want to pass a resolution on.
Okay, let's go now then. Just for that. And then for the rest, we can come back after the meeting.
Right.
Okay.
You have a motion.
Phyllis.
Oh, I gotta get on the right page.
There you go.
Thank you. I hereby make a motion to enter into executive session as authorized by Section 105(1)(f) of the Public Officer Law to discuss collective negotiation pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law.
I second that motion.
Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Jones?
Aye.
Trustee Epstein?
Yes.
Thank you. Just for one thing, because we might need to do something, I'll be back.